It was only a few months ago that the Super NES Classic came out, a plug-and-play console that provided instant access to 21 mostly cherished games. It was a great product at a great price, even if it wasn't quite perfect. There was no way to add games, officially at least. Games were limited to 720p upscaled, some small inaccuracies crept through from the emulation process, and there was a serious lack of display options for the more technically inclined. And that's where Analogue Super NT comes in, which largely addresses all of these problems head on, except it does so in a very different way. Instead of being a self-contained plug-and-play console that includes a ton of games, the Super NT is essentially an actual Super Nintendo, right down to the cartridge slot that can accept any Super Nintendo or even Super Famicom game. Which means if you don't own any game cartridges, you probably won't be doing much gaming on this thing. Now, another key difference is that instead of emulating those games as the Super NES Classic did, the Super NT is designed to simulate the Super Nintendo's actual hardware, which should, theoretically at least, allow for a more accurate, true to the original experience, with zero input lag, as if you were playing on an actual Super Nintendo. Only this time with some modern features, such as HDMI output with support for up to 1080p resolution, and a ton of display options to tailor the look exactly how you want, which includes settings for the aspect ratio, screen height, cropping, scan lines to simulate that old school CRT look, even if I found it to be a bit off-putting, and some pretty fantastic scaler options to smooth out those jagged edges. Now, while I generally preferred using no scaler at all, I have to say I was extremely impressed by the quality of the 3x option, which lent certain games a far smoother, almost painting-like aesthetic. Oh, and there's an X-ray option too that can be fun to mess around with. And then there's some more advanced options, like different buffering modes, or allowing for more sprites to be shown on screen at a time. But if I'm being honest, these settings intimidated me a little bit. Unfortunately, the UI itself isn't especially attractive or user-friendly, being entirely text-based, which makes it easy to get lost in the submenus. It lacks the elegance and simplicity of the Super NES Classic, although it is far more robust, even giving options to tweak the options? Yeah, you can change things like the font, highlight color, or even what button combination brings up the interface mid-game. But sadly, none of them made the menu much prettier. Although I did appreciate they can even play around and change the LED color on the unit itself. Hell yeah, I want classic purple as a standby color. Now, one annoying aspect is that these changes aren't saved automatically, making you back out to the main menu in order to manually save them. Otherwise, they'll be reset next time you turn the system back on. Oh, and while there is an option to restore the settings to factory condition, which thank God, because it's pretty easy to change something for the worse, I really wish the system offered the option to restore the settings on a per-page basis, instead of making you reset the entire thing all at once. Of course, the absolutely most important question is, how well do the games actually play? Now, full disclosure, I'm not the most technically savvy guy out there. However, I am pretty observant. Remember, I'm the guy that made a 10-minute Zelda analysis about grass. And I've long been annoyed by even minor imperfections when it comes to emulators, whether it be a sound effect that's just a wrong pitch, or some slight input lag. And while I was generally very impressed with the quality of Super NES Classic's emulation, even it can't quite match up to the across-the-board excellence that I found with the Super NT, which truly portrayed these games almost exactly as I remembered, only now with much sharper visuals. Yep, even sharper than the Super NES Classic thanks to the 1080p output. And speaking of that comparison, a few other issues are cleaned up too. Like, do you remember that weird issue that Yoshi's Island had on the Classic, where the background and Touch Fuzzy Get Dizzy would blink away? Yeah, that doesn't happen here, just as it didn't on the original Super Nintendo. And then there's Star Fox, which actually ran faster in the Super NES Classic than it did on the original hardware. Which, granted, isn't necessarily a bad thing, unless you're a purist like me looking for true accuracy. In which case, the Super NT played Star Fox almost exactly spot on based on my performance test. Super Nintendo games have never looked better while playing this level of performance with no lag. At least in my experience. However, given that the NT is essentially a souped up Super Nintendo, or maybe a Super Nintendo, that does mean that there's no support for suspend or save points, which is a feature I rather enjoyed on the Super NES Classic, as it made some of those tougher games a lot more bearable. For better or for worse, with the Super NT, you're playing these games almost exactly as they were originally intended to be. Physically speaking, the hardware itself is impressively small, coming in only a little bit larger than the Super Nintendo Classic, but it feels sturdier built, with thick plastic and a nice hefty weight. It also has a rubber underside ensuring it won't slip all over the place. And it's available in 4 functionally identical styles: Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, Black, and Transparent. And while they all look great, I found myself digging the black and transparent ones the most. Now unfortunately, unlike the Super NES Classic, this system doesn't come with a controller, let alone 2. However, it is compatible with every Super Nintendo controller and accessory. So odds are, if you have some games lying around, you probably have some controllers too. But in case you don't, Analogue partnered with 8BitDo to make some fantastic wireless controllers that capture the feel of the original systems, as well as the look of any particular Super NT style. Now, with the Super NT's dependency on you owning the physical cartridges, you might be surprised to learn that it doesn't in fact come with a single game built in, being Factor 5's Super Turrican. And it even comes in two varieties, the original version on Super Nintendo, as well as a never-before-released director's cut that has some additional content that had to be pulled from the original game. It's certainly a nice bonus, along the lines of Star Fox 2 on the Super NES Classic. So overall, I found the Super NT to be a fantastic little device that allowed me to re-experience my existing Super NES library at a level of quality I hadn't before. Now don't get me wrong, the Super NES Classic's emulation got close, but not quite to this level. And that system didn't let me play Stunt Race FX, or any number of the over 700 plus games released for the Super Nintendo, or over 2,000 if you take into account the Super Famicom's library, which again work on the Super NT. Heck, if you have a Super Game Boy, that means you can play Game Boy games too, adding hundreds more potential compatible titles. Just make sure you enable the cartridge audio option. Now I should mention that I did have some trouble getting the 3 Super Famicom games I owned working on the 2 different units I tried, and I had to carefully insert them at just the right angle to make them work, although another reviewer I spoke to had no such trouble, so your mileage may vary. The Super NT really feels like it was designed for someone like me, someone who already has a large collection of classic Super Nintendo games and is looking for a better way to play them. I mean, have you tried using an original Super Nintendo recently? Not only does it have to be in working order, but you'll also have to have a TV with the appropriate ancient inputs, all in an effort to play these classic games at a quality less than they deserve. Oh, and good luck trying to capture video or stream from the Super Nintendo, it's a major hassle. So the fact that the Super NT offers a pain-free way to play the games that I already own at a fidelity higher than ever before is something that I adore. Especially as a YouTuber, as it'll make capturing gameplay a hell of a lot easier. But what if you're not someone like me? While the Super NT might be the best way to play these games, that really only counts if you already own the games. Because if you're not interested in building a collection, then the Super NT really has nothing to offer. Especially at the asking price of $189 at the time of this video. And that's not even counting the cost of acquiring the games themselves. And in that sense, I think the Super NT's demographic is pretty much limited to old school fans like myself, or those looking for a more purist experience. Kinda like collecting vinyls these days. So if you're just looking to dabble lightly in the Super NES era for a bit, the Super NES Classic is a much more economical option. Even if it can't quite reach the fidelity of the Super NT, it's more than close enough. Especially for those playing these games for the first time. But again, if you're anything like me, one who grew up with these games and still cherish them to this day, well, I think there's a good chance you'll end up loving the Super NT. Because I know I do. Even if the asking price does seem a bit high. And with that, thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe to GameXplain for everything Nintendo.